I call Dennis O'Rourke.
It has a comprehensive housing strategy. That is laughable, laughable. To them, the term comprehensive housing strategy is just a name, not a reality. If they had a strategy, we would have heard about it years ago, because strategies are long-term. In fact, it's just a term that's been invented by the national government in the last few days for purely political spin purposes. Everybody in this country knows that this government doesn't have and never has had a housing strategy, let alone a comprehensive one. And that's the truth of that matter. Even if it was a strategy, it would be clearly one which has been aimed at accelerating house prices to over $1 million in Auckland and rising steeply in other parts of the country. It would also be a strategy characterised by a design for skilled workers to be forced out of Auckland where they are needed most because they cannot afford a home. And it would be one that tolerates people living in cars, tents and under bridges and that sort of thing. Now, Mr Speaker, when you look at the estimates, you get, and yes, I have looked at the estimates, Mr Chairman.
Let's talk about them.
And when you do that, you see this. You see that what I'm saying is absolutely true, because what it provides for is this: a total of $257 million over 4 years. That's an average of about $64 million per year. But of that, $200 million, or an average of $50 million per year, the lion's share of it, is to top up the income-related rent subsidy. So that is absolutely nothing new. Nothing strategic about that at all. Just business as usual. In addition to that, there's $41 million for emergency housing, again, over 4 years, only about $10 million per year. And in fact, Minister Bennett admits that all that will do is to maintain the status quo for emergency housing. And emergency housing is needed, of course, because this government hasn't actually got a housing plan or strategy, so it needs emergency housing, which shouldn't be necessary if there was an adequate housing plan in the first place. It's just a band-aid at the bottom of a cliff, not even an ambulance at the bottom of a cliff, just a band-aid. $10 million a year won't go very far for emergency housing. It's just a bit more money to put people into more motel rooms while the panic continues over how they should be housed properly. So there's no strategy, no genuine plan. And New Zealand First also objects to this other provision in the budget, which is one entitled Growing the Maori Housing Network. And that's a fund allocated at $3.15 million per year for 4 years, a total of $12.6 million for, quote, repairing and building homes for whānau living in substandard accommodation, including emergency housing, unquote. Now, Mr Chairman, it should not be necessary to have a separate budget provision for housing for Maori. The truth is that people in this country, whether they be Maori or Pākehā, who cannot afford housing, can't find a place to live, need to be assisted, whether they are Maori, whether they are Pākehā, whatever their race should be. It is wrong to allocate funding like that according to race, and New Zealand First strongly objects to that. What New Zealand First does want is what the government isn't actually providing, which is a genuine long-term housing strategy, and that's something we believe needs to be done independently of the political process by a housing commission. And it needs to be based on a much, much greater degree of direct government investment in housing by the government providing the funds for the purchase of land where it's needed for residential housing, by seeing that that land gets developed, and by selling sections and built houses on easy terms to first home buyers directly. You probably on a subordinated loan basis so that the people could still go and get a bank loan if they wish as well. So that's the kind of policy we see as being necessary.